As time moves forward, as technology changes and grows, as the infrastructure of companies continue to ebb and flow, one thing remains the same. A leader has to produce. This is the Mosley Method Mastering Leadership Podcast, a transformational leadership approach that's centered around three core concepts: vulnerability, transparency, and authenticity. On this show, you'll learn how to be open and honest with yourself and with others, while also developing trust, empathy, and respect within your team. You'll learn how to empower them to take ownership of their roles and responsibilities. This is the Mosley Method Mastering Leadership Podcast. And now your host, Edward E. Mosley Jr.
Welcome everybody to another episode of the Mosley Method Mastering Leadership Podcast, where we talk all things leadership, the good, the bad, the ugly, things that we can talk about now that we could not talk about inside the rooms. And we have a great guest today. His name is John Tarantino, multiple hats, attorney, CEO, managing director, and we're going to get into all of that. So without further ado, John, we'd like to welcome you to the show. Introduce yourself and just give us your brief take on your perspective of leadership.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on your show. My name is John Tarantino, and I've been an attorney for more than 42 years. I was the president of my law firm for about 25 years until I stepped down in 2022 to become senior counsel at the firm. I'm also the chief executive officer of a company called Ilon Precision Oncology, which is a precision oncology. They have about 30 oncologists around the world who work for us and with us. And then finally, I'm the managing trustee and director of two very large charitable foundations. So different hats, as you said. But they all involve leadership. Maybe different positions, but they all involve leadership. And I've tried to use the same leadership style, whether it was at the law firm or precision oncology company, or in my role as managing trustee or director of foundations. My leadership style is that first and foremost, I want to be, honest and have integrity and be transparent. I want people in my company or my organization to know where I stand, and to be honest and direct about where I stand. Because I don't think you can be a true leader if you're not respected by the persons that you are leading. I also believe that it's important for leaders to take care of, and I mean that in a good way, not in a patronizing way, but to take good care of their staff and their employees, everyone that works in their organization. I think it's really important for leaders to foster trust, because without trust, again, I don't think anyone can be an effective leader. And I guess the last thing that I would say is that I make it clear to the people who work with me and for me that there's, I think, a significant difference between a manager and a leader. A manager, in my view, knows how to do his or her job, and they do that job well. And they make sure that things are done right in the job that they do. In my view, a leader's role is different. The leader makes sure that the right things are done in the organization, not tasks being done the right way, but that the right things are done in the organization. And that's what I have always tried to do in my years of having a leadership role.
John, I think that was spot on. You brought up a couple great points, and the first one I would like to ask you about is I'm not a lawyer. I might be considered I don't know, a book lawyer, or, just a, you know, but that has had to be a difficult task, and I know you use the word task, and I'm going there. I'm going there. Of still allowing the creativity and the flexibility from a lawyer perspective, a CEO perspective, a director perspective, of allowing your employees to be creative and flexible. And how was that in your 42 years? What has been the challenge of that, allowing that creativity and flexibility to stay true and transparent to them?
You're right. It's not an easy thing to do. I think it's a little different in the law firm than it is in my other jobs. Most of the folks who work in law firms as lawyers are very confident people. They have been very successful people throughout their lives, and they were successful in going to law school and passing the bar and becoming a lawyer. So all of them, or most of them, have, some innate confidence. And I think it's really important for a leader not to stifle that, not to fail to encourage creativity, fail to listen, fail to learn. One of the greatest, things that I did in my 42 years as the president of my firm was to learn an amazing amount, not only about different areas of the law and different ways of running a firm or managing a firm, but I became a much better leader, I believe, by listening to the people who worked with me. And I know there are lots of leaders who have said this. I think it goes back to ancient, sort of African tribes, the way that they did things. I know Nelson Mandela talked about his father doing it this way, and that's the concept of the leader speaks last. And I think there's real value in that, because if the leader speaks first, that can stifle conversation. And others who are around the table might think the leader has made up his or her mind and really doesn't want to listen to anyone else. I have never done that. I didn't do it before I even knew Nelson Mandela's father suggested that's the way that leaders do things. I always believed that it was much more effective to listen to everyone who wanted to talk. First of all, I become more knowledgeable, and I can take all of those things into account. And then once everyone had an opportunity to present his or her viewpoint on something, then I would weigh in and hopefully, fashion the discussion to ultimately get to the point that we wanted to be at. But I think it's really important for leaders not to just take control of a situation. That to me is not leadership. That's more like dictatorship. But to listen to the people that, you have around your table or in your organization, and then try to lead the discussion to where the way you want it to go.
I like that. I really do. I think that's very key, because if you speak too soon, then you're guiding the direction toward the direction and the path that you want to go. And not allowing their creativity and their flexibility and their expertise to kind of brainstorm it out and then kind of corral it back in. But doesn't that also, and I've heard people say that with that approach, they're seen as sometimes passive aggressive. Like it's like, why did you allow us to go down this path if you knew that you didn't want us to go that direction? So why didn't you speak up first? So I've seen it, I've heard it from kind of both different directions. Um, what is your take on that?
I think most people would feel, I mean, unless it's simply contrived, in a pretext, meaning you never change your position or you really don't listen to anyone. You're multitasking while people are talking. That's, that's insulting. And I can see where that would lead to a passive aggressive. I hope that has not been my style. I go into meetings, believing that I have a pretty, clear view of what things should be done. But I will tell you, in 25 years and hundreds and hundreds of meetings, uh, I have changed my view after listening to folks many, many, many times because I don't know everything. My mom used to say, John, you're not always right, but you're never in doubt. And there was some truth to that I was very, very confident that I knew the right way to do things. But I've learned in the course of my career that I believe in the vast majority of cases, I have done things, the right things,
Hmm.
but they're almost always after being better informed. So my views are molded. Uh, I hope I listen well, and I hope I'm able to lead my organizations because I'm much better informed than I was going into the meeting.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. So what's, and I think you've already kind of talked about it, but what's another strategy that you use over years or molded or pivoted over years that allows you that trust level? How did you get to that trust level where you are now in your leadership style?
I think the easiest way to get to the trust level is, as I say, to be honest and direct with people. Um, People don't want a cheerleader, I don't think, as a leader. I think they want someone who they believe is going to lead them in the right direction. And just as I want to listen to them to be better informed, I want them to know this is the kind of person I am. This is what my belief system is. This is what I care about. This is how I want to guide the organization. And today it's really popular, and I think it's fantastic that there's such a thing as, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I was into diversity, equity, and inclusion, 30 years ago because it's the way I grew up. I believed having different viewpoints, different world experiences, and being exposed to those made me a much better, well-rounded person. And what I try to do is I try to talk to everybody in the firm as a lawyer. But I mean everybody. I don't mean just the lawyers.
Hmm.
I mean the lawyers and the secretaries and the paralegals and the support staff and the copy room person and the mailroom person and the marketing person, because it's one firm. We're one company. I like to think that many of us are friends. We know each other for years. Our kids know each other. We've gone to each other's homes, weddings, unfortunately funerals. And that, yeah, we're a business and it's important to make money, but it's much more important to really have that cohesive view that we are in this together,
Yeah.
that we row in the same direction.
So why is that such a, so a little of my background, I'm HR. I did HR. I'm more workforce development, performance improvement, um, scale, organizational development, and training and workforce development. But I've always been around coworkers that are in that EEO and in that equal opportunity world. What is this topic, diversity, inclusion, equity and inclusion, Why is that such a hard, why is it such a sensitive topic of just across the globe, across our country? Why do you think that that's such a sensitive topic?
I think there are several reasons why. I think, and I'm not saying people are bad or biased or prejudiced. I think, I think there are people who feel threatened by it, who feel for some reason, if you accept diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I mean it across the board, not only
Mm-hmm.
a person's skin color, their religion, their gender, their choices, all of those things. I think that's who we are as a society. That's who we are. And if you can call it diversity, equity, inclusion. I just like inclusion
Yeah.
because it's everybody. It's who we are as a society. And if you look at it as this is who we are, then no one should feel threatened. If sometimes using terms like diversity, equity, inclusion, people think, well, that only favors a particular group. That's not what it's meant to be. It's meant that we're in this together. This is how we live. This is our society. This is our country. Remember, America was described as the great melting pot. You took people from all different cultures, all around the world, and you made them into a cohesive America, United States, United America. Unfortunately, today there's a lot of division. I hope that we will have leaders who will find a way to bring us more together than apart. That's certainly my hope. I still say my prayers every day.
Me too.
That's in my prayers every day. I pray for our country every day.
Yeah, it's just and I don't want to go down this path, but it's just amazing to me, to your point, like we are in this together, and it's almost like we're just loyal to one view by even hearing or understanding or accepting somebody else's view. And I pray that same thing. I hope that we do have leaders that eventually will say, hey, we are in this together, and let's move, let's remember that. I just wanted to, when you said that, it really was really interesting to me about that, the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece. What is your approach? Has your approach changed over time, when it comes to leadership and things that you've seen that you maybe didn't like, not maybe just in yourself, but in your peers, at your level of leadership?
I think leadership style has generally been the same, but I will tell you I am much more patient as a leader today than I was initially. Initially, I felt when I was elevated to the leadership role in our firm, I was young. I was in my late 30s. I'm going to be 69 in February, so I was a young person.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt a little bit that I had to prove myself, that I was worthy of being a leader. And I think that's a mistake. I don't think one proves himself or herself being a leader. I think people do what is right and they are recognized and accepted as the leader for doing that. So I think I'm more experienced. I'm more patient. I think I'm a better leader than I was, 30 years ago because I have learned from my past mistakes. At least I hope I have.
Yeah. So what would be one or two pieces of advice that you would give those managers or those employees that are aspiring to be leaders or think they are leaders?
I want to give this sort of example, and I know it's not perfect, but I'm a big NFL fan, big football fan. And in the NFL, you have your head coach And then you have, offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators, special teams coordinators, and lots of assistant coaches. And they have something called a coaching tree, so that managers, or I call the manager is sort of like the offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. And one day, if they do a good enough job, some other team may hire them to become the head coach of that other team. And they become part of that head coach's coaching tree. And I think the same is true with leadership, that there should be considered a leadership tree. And what I take the greatest pride in that I have done is to work with initially younger people and then sort of mid-level people who I think were good managers, and help them develop into leaders, not only in my firm, which now someone else is the leader of my firm, but so that they could have leadership in organizations that they belong to, whether it's the Bar Association, or whether it's a civic and charitable organization, or whether it's a foundation. And I really hope that they have learned, and I've helped them to learn, how to be a leader by listening, by having integrity, by being honest, and by having the same kinds of, I hope, good communication skills that I was able to impart to them. So I'm very proud of my leadership tree. Yeah. Many of the lawyers who were young or somewhat inexperienced today are real leaders in my firm, in other organizations, in bar associations, and the like.
I like that. And I do understand the football analogy. I get it, and I am envisioning the leadership tree. At what level does that tree start? How did that concept come into play?
Again, again, to use the football analogy, you start out basically at a very low coaching level. You're learning how to coach. Mm-hmm. And then as you get more experience and the head coach or the leader has more confidence in you, you'll be given more responsibility. You might be an offensive line coach, or a linebackers coach, or a wide receivers coach. Ultimately, you might become a quarterbacks coach and then the offensive coordinator. On the defensive side, the same thing. You might be the defensive end coach or special teams coach, and then ultimately you're the defensive coordinator. So I think if I have a talent, it's to be able to recognize leaders or future leaders. And I encourage anyone that I see, male, female, black, white, purple, whatever color, whatever religion, whatever culture, if I recognize someone as having leadership potential, I'm going to do everything I can to help that person maximize. We have something here in Rhode Island. I know they have it in other states as well. We call it Leadership Rhode Island. There's leadership programs in other states as well, mm-hmm. where you take young people who are future leaders and you have them have an immersive course, a year-long course on leadership and how to become leaders and what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses, and to learn everything about our state, what makes our state tick, what are the good things, what are the bad things, and hopefully help those folks emerge as leaders. Every person in my firm who I believe has leadership potential, I send them that course, because they not only hear from me and have my view on leadership, they hear from other experts and other leaders.
So let me ask you a question when it comes to that. I've seen some organizations are hesitant to identify those potential leaders because of the perception of those that are not selected or identified as potential leaders. How have you seen any kind of pushback or a change in workplace ethics, or not ethics, but in the workplace, on how if those, you have one employee that you've identified as a leader, aspiring leader, than those that you did not?
Honestly, I think it's harder to find leaders than having too many of them. It has not been my experience that people who have not been selected as leaders are clamoring to be leaders. I think, unfortunately, there's a dearth of leadership, and that we need more leaders, not fewer of them. There's plenty of room in organizations for people who have leadership abilities. So from my experience, most people want to be led rather than to lead because it's more comfortable. Yeah. It's easier. It's less stressful. The leader, the true leader, has a very difficult job. When I began, I had black hair. Okay, my hair is white.
I had hair.
Part of it is I'm much older, but part of it is there's a lot of stress in leadership. There's a lot of rewards in being a leader, and then there's a lot of stress in being a leader. And if you really want to lead, you have to take the good with the bad. It's not all accolades.
Yeah, and it's lonely. It's that circle is very small. If the circle is very small. But I think what I'm hearing, and I've seen this a lot, is you have to be very vulnerable and transparent, and you have to find yourself, because it takes some time for a leader, a really good leader, to find themselves. And one person that I always follow, and I read several of his books, was Colin Powell. And one of the things I liked about what he said in several of his books was, it took him some time, but eventually he never had square tables in his offices. He liked round tables, because the round tables allowed everybody at the table, down from the most junior person, to feel as though they were valued and their opinions mattered. And I thought it was very significant, because he wanted everybody's, to your same point, he wanted everybody's opinion. He wanted everybody to feel part of the team. And, so I do know that is very, very true today. The last thing I want to ask you, is the football analogy. I love it. I see it. So why is it that, and I think this goes back to a point that you spoke about early. Why is it that we won't use that approach in today's leadership? Meaning, when we're looking for a quarterback or a lineman or receiver or whatever, we go out and we scout that person. We find them. They're great at what they do. We bring them in for that job because they can perform, and they're that piece of the puzzle that we're missing. But in most cases, instead of doing that in a specific manner, we just take somebody who may be a manager, and we elevate them, and we promote them to that supervisor, that leader. And that person may just be an awesome project manager and not a leader. Why won't we take that same approach when it comes to finding those valuable people and putting them in those positions because they are aspiring leaders?
I think we have to. I think that's a major mistake that people make. Not every good manager or even great manager is a good, let alone great leader. They're different skill sets. There are things that my, quote, managers can do much better than I can do. Much better than I can do. But my role as leader is not to do their job better than they can do their job. My role as leader is to take all of those jobs, everything. I'm assuming all of my managers are going to do a good job. If they're not, then they may not continue to work for me.
Yeah.
But assuming they do good jobs, it's now I want to make sure that all of those good jobs equate to doing things as an organization right. And that's what the leader does. Take all of that good work, or work that is done the right way, and making sure your organization does things that are right as opposed to wrong.
I love it. One last question. I know I said that was the last question, but one last question. I want your expertise and view on this. I've seen a lot of organizations, especially in more of your governmental agencies, local, state, and federal agencies. They are really hesitant and reluctant to remove employees, and I know there's some legal ramifications in place, but I've seen where there have been several complaints, several cases against certain people in leadership positions, but they will not remove that person. They won't take them out of leadership positions, and it has affected organizations tremendously. Why do you feel as though some organizations could potentially be taken, I don't want to say a blind's eye, but not making that move to remove employees, regardless of the legal ramifications?
Certainly, as a lawyer, I would hope that however they did it legally. So assuming it's done legally, assuming there are no legal impediments to removing a person, and that it's done, without an ulterior motive. It's simply the person is not a good leader, and the person needs to be replaced. The reason it's not done is because it's hard. Because it's hard. People don't like confrontation. They don't like to make hard decisions. The easiest thing is let it just go. But I will tell you that is a mistake. And from my perspective, a leader of an organization has a fiduciary duty to that organization to protect it and to protect the people who work in that organization. And if you are afraid of making hard decisions, then you shouldn't be a leader. Leaders make hard decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I 100% agree with you. But I have seen things. I was personally part of a very toxic workplace, one of the workplaces. And, this particular person is still in the same position. And so I don't know if they're just, waiting for the person to retire or, whatever it is. But to your point, it's a mistake, and high turnover rate. The culture is really, really, bad. Closing thoughts. What would be your closing thoughts to the listening audience that you would like to share?
I think if you're interested in leadership, if you're truly interested in leadership, meaning you want to be a leader, then don't be shy about telling the current leadership, this is what I want to do and why. Not because you want a title, not because leaders usually make more than non-leaders do. Those are sort of incidental benefits of being a leader. But if you want to be a leader, it has to be in here, in your heart. You have to say, I believe that I can bring this organization and bring the people in the organization to a better place. I will give more to the organization than I ever take from the organization. I will be selfless in that regard. It's not about me. It's about us. It's about the organization. And the very first thing that I said, I think is true. You have to be willing to say, I am going to care about the people that are in my charge, people that are below me, the people that I'm supposed to be someone they look up to. I am going to take care of them, not in a patronizing way, because I don't believe they can take care of themselves, but because that's what a leader does. And if you believe you have that in you, then you should let your current leadership know, because if your current leadership are good leaders, they're going to want to encourage that. They're going to want to make sure that that leadership tree that I talked to, the branches are spreading out.
I love it, John. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for taking the time to come on the show. And I really believe that the listeners will get some really good information in this particular episode here. again, thank you for coming onto the show.
Well, thank you very much, and I hope everyone enjoys the conversation, and let's get some great leaders.
Yes, and so everybody, again, you've been listening to the Mosley Method Mastering Leadership Podcast. Edward E. Mosley Jr. has 30 years of leadership experience and is an ICF credentialed leadership coach. And it's his passion to inspire leaders who can foster a safe space where they can empower their followers to take ownership of their roles and responsibilities while sparking collaboration and creativity. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But until then, find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Edward E. Mosley Jr. To contact the show, send your emails to limitlessboundsteam@gmail.com. See you next time on the Mosley Method Mastering Leadership Podcast.